Guns a-blazing with the NRA, as today there was an article published out how Bank of America, MasterCard, and the National Rifle Association, aka the NRA, are now lobbying the Marijuana Act. And this grabbed a lot of attention in the space, Anthony. So are there any implications or challenges with the NRA's involvement in this, given their stance on gun control and the legalization of cannabis? It's interesting.
I think it's very interesting. I don't want to rain on everyone's parade before we get started, but just to preface this, yes, they are lobbying towards the SAFER bill. However, no one knows if it's for or against. They are just actively lobbying as it relates to the bill. But such as what happens in the state of Florida, the fact that I'm a medical marijuana patient, I cannot go purchase a firearm right now. You can't own a firearm and you can own a firearm, but you can't buy a firearm and have a medical marijuana card in tandem. They won't let you.
Really? I did not know that.
So in the NRA's standpoint, that is obviously unconstitutional, as it should be your free and inalienable right to own a firearm. So the NRA, I'd have to assume, are on the right side of this from a lobbying perspective. Bank of America and the other financial institution that was mentioned, I would have to err on the side of they are on our side from a lobbying perspective as well.
Yeah.
As Section 10, it did have language that was that had, in regards to the AML laws and the relaxing of that, had implications with firearms, alcohol, big tobacco, and I think oil and gas. And Bank of America, they want a piece of the cannabis pie. I do believe that they are all on the right side of this lobbying effort. However, just wanted to be the cautious optimist that I am. The disclosures that were found does not say which way they are lobbying as it relates to SAFER.
Ben, you agree with that?
I think the fact that you cannot buy a firearm if you own a medical card in Florida, I mean, obviously that's unconstitutional. I'm not an attorney. It would seem that way, but it bugs me from the perspective that cannabis is still looked at as something that's going to make you irrational, that's going to drive you crazy. I mean, obviously they're connecting the two so that you can't purchase one because of the stigma that, consuming cannabis has. So something's got to change with that because, can you buy a firearm if you drink a beer? I mean, it's should be the same dynamic.
I mean, I think it was just horse trading. As it relates to actually getting the medical marijuana infrastructure passed in Florida. They probably had to horse trade a couple of points.
Yeah.
And dually owning a gun and a medical marijuana card somewhere along the line was probably like, well, it's not really that big of a deal, and it's a winning point on the other side, so let's just give it to them.
Yeah, but think about the intonations to that, Anthony. Think about
I'm completely against it.
I'm not saying you're saying this, but I'm just saying you're effectively saying that the regulatory stature is effectively saying that that owning a medical cannabis card could make you more likely to do something wrong with your firearm or something like that. And it's got a stigma attached to it by de facto. And how many medical cannabis cards are owned in Florida? Probably like close to what? A few hundred thousand, a million?
Yeah. So the thing that I thought was strange, and I don't really want to get too into this because it's obviously just regulatory focused, but I own firearms. I own assault rifles, and I was able to get my medical marijuana card.
Interesting.
But if I'm in possession of my medical marijuana card as it stands today, I can't go to a store and purchase a new firearm. So tell me how that makes sense. Because
that makes zero sense.
I'm in the state registry as being a firearm owner, and they still let me get my marijuana card.
So Bank of America and MasterCard, you've heard these names before in the past. What's this say about the NRA now? Potentially, you're saying could be one way or the other, but if they are in favor, big name to be backing up this industry, don't you think?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I put this on Twitter this morning. I mean, the NRA is the GOP's daddy. The NRA owns the GOP.
That's
you want to talk about probably the most powerful lobbying entity in this country. The NRA is up there in the top 3 or 5.
That's interesting. Good point.
The NRA wants something done. The GOP and the good old boys up in Washington, they get it done.
They get it done with that happens.
They get it. They get it done.
Hence the reason why, Ben, this feels different, right?
I think so. I mean, what excites me more is even Bank of America's on board, because I think about the financial reach that they have, assets under management, MasterCard. I mean, they're looking at this from how do we profit from this? And if you have those big, huge tier one institutional backing for this bill, I mean, it's going to be hard to shut that out. So
I mean, these are heavyweights.
These are heavyweights. I mean,
Big
MasterCard
heavyweight.
is like, what's their market cap? Like 50 billion dollar company, something like that.
Somewhere around there. But I mean, these are just heavyweights in Washington. Like, they want something done, they get it done. It is what it is.
Yeah. Same in Pennsylvania, right? CF, as what you're stating in Florida. That's interesting. Yep. Doesn't make sense, but one day it will. Speaking of heavyweights, let's now shift to the psychedelic industry, where industry heavyweight Cybin announced today that's closing of the Small Pharma acquisition, which will create, according to Cybin, an international clinical stage leader in novel psychedelic therapeutics. Anthony, when you combine these two companies' portfolios, this is a big time player now. What stands out to you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was what made Steve Cohen in Point72 actually invest in Cybin. Cybin's now truly investable. They have a moat. They have defense around their DMT portfolio. They have 30 patents granted and 160 pending as it relates to DMT. Yeah. And this creates IP. They've got data coming out later this year, I think in the phase 2 trials. And this really gives them that moat and deems them as an investable entity from a biotech perspective.
Yeah. Two most important letters in psychedelics, IP, that's for sure. But yeah, let's now switch to political news out of Washington. And then go ahead.
Phase 1 data will be out later this year on 004, anticipated later in the year.
But you're also right. They have the phase 2 for CYB003 for psilocybin. So they actually have 2 readouts coming. Yeah. DMT is phase 1 and the phase 2 before the year's out.
Yeah. Okay. So many investors with this announcement are, let's say, they are concerned. Should they be? What do you think?
Well, I will reiterate what I said when I thought potentially this was a Steve Scalise position to lose, and he did. Jim Jordan's position to lose, and he did. You know, they say the early bird gets the worm, but I often say the second mouse gets the cheese. In this case, it was the fourth mouse that got the cheese. I'm not sure he even wanted the cheese by this point. It was kind of stale. But the point here is, I don't believe that any speaker who wins their speakership with such a narrow margin. Remember, there's still 5 guys who could say, you're out of here. And we have way more than 5 supporters of safe banking and cannabis reform in general. So I do not expect Mike Johnson to vote yes on safe banking, but I also don't expect him to kill safe banking either.
Okay. All right. So status quo.
Do you expect safe to get jammed into something else, or do you think it's still going to go through the motions in its current form? With the speakership and just with what could potentially happen, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sorry I lost you a little bit there. I will tell you that I'm still, to use a term that you all would appreciate on this show, and I don't do the equity position. I don't own any stock in this, but I'm still bullish on safe banking. I'm actually more bullish than I was, 10 months ago, because since 10 months ago, when I first said that, and I came up with a list of reasons, we lost friends in high places. We do not have a speaker anymore. But we actually did have a hearing on safe banking in the Senate, and the first ever markup and roll call vote in a Senate Banking Committee. We've never had that before. So we're just waiting for safe banking to be rolled out on the Senate floor and then brought over to the House. Now, I will say, people have asked me, what's the path in the House? Well, the Safe Banking Act is probably more likely to be the Safe Banking Amendment. This will probably be amended onto some other must-pass bill, and there will be the votes to do that. They wouldn't do that in the Senate because they hadn't gone through regular order, and now they have, and they've voted this thing out twice in the House. When I say twice, it's been voted in the House 7 times, but it's parts of other bills. I mean, there have been 2 actual votes in the House. So I don't think. Look, the last 3 weeks have been painful, and they've been painful because I've been here, and nothing, as far as cannabis policy has happened, and that's been tough. And the clock is not our friend. But I think at the end of the day, what happened here with the speaker's race will have a relatively small impact on safe banking becoming law.
That's
Don, were you
encouraging to know.
surprised that that Mike Johnson was voted right away, like on the first floor vote, and got that support? Because as we know, Scalise didn't get the support, Jordan didn't get the support, and then Tom Emmer dropped out before a floor vote even happened. So I think, were you surprised that it all came together right away for Johnson?
No, because it was almost like when I woke up to the news. I saw the news last night, but when I woke up and I saw a couple of tweets from what I call the Troublemaker Caucus, and I say that affectionately, the guys who would have stood in the way, potentially could have stood in the way, and they stood down. And I knew right away, the Matt Gaetzes of the world, the Tom Masseys of the world, who were very good on drug policy, they were willing to let this move forward. And I think in large part it's because people are exhausted.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not exhausted physically, but they're exhausted emotionally, mentally. There's been a civil war here, and people have said and done things to one another within their own caucus they'll never be able to take back. And I do think that's going to be a problem long.
How many? Lost you there for a second. He'll come back in just a minute. But
Yeah.
interesting news where. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
lost you there.
Don, are you hearing any rumblings about the bill that Nancy Mace is reintroducing or putting together in terms of legalization?
No, and not because I haven't heard anything about her bill. I haven't heard anything about anything other than this speaker's race in the last 3 weeks. So I do find that the timing interesting. If I was the comms person, I probably wouldn't want my bill dropping at the same time that they've reelected a new speaker. I find that interesting. So for whatever reason, they chose to do it now.
And then I guess for like the layperson, is there like a normalization period that's going to take place here in the House for them to actually get back to business, or things will start to speed up here pretty quickly as far as them just functioning like a normal regular body of government?
The truth is they've actually been having hearings while all this was going on. I mean, they did not stop everything. Those hearings were planned before, and the Speaker Pro Tem did not stop that or didn't have to weigh in. So I've been going to hearings for the last 3 weeks.
How many days was it? How many days was it without a House Speaker? Was it 17?
No, I think we're on 22.
22 days.
Yeah.
You ever seen anything like this before? Like what's the atmosphere been like that for the past 22 days down at Capitol Hill?
Not only have I never seen anything like it, no one's ever seen anything like this. Has never happened before, right?
Yeah.
And, like for everyone who sits back and doesn't know the players, they don't understand. And I'll be honest, what Matt Gaetz did, love him or hate him, was unprecedented. Yeah. And, I asked a member who is good on SAFE and who was part of by the way, when I said I was bullish on SAFE, I didn't anticipate a coup. And that's essentially what we had here. But the guys who led the coup were our friends. And so with the new speaker in place, I don't believe for a second that the Matt Gaetzes of the world will not have his ear in a big way.
Interesting.
And I can't see a scenario where Mike Johnson kills safe banking. Just no way. Just no way.
Yeah, I wanted to bring you on and get your take because I know you had, your thoughts on this whole lawsuit. But maybe first explain to our viewers, like, what they should take away from this, and are you in support of this lawsuit?
Yeah, for sure, I'm in support of the lawsuit. I think the key takeaway is nothing's going to come of this anytime soon.
Right.
And so it doesn't change for this to be successful. And I think they even get to the heart of it when they did the announcement in the press release. This isn't about winning in a local court. This is about making it all the way to the Supreme Court, so they could change policy across the U.S. I believe that's their end goal here, and that just takes a long time. There's no way you'll work through the various courts, whether it be the local court up to the circuit court and then ultimately the Supreme Court. It's going to take a couple of years, I think, for it to wind through. I don't think this is one of those policies that will fast track through the court system.
So maybe walk us. Go ahead, Anthony.
I think that's a good point, but I think also, like, what are we looking at here that doesn't have a long tail timing wise? Because let's be real. Schedule 3, even if the DEA comes out and says yes tomorrow, we're probably looking 12 to 18 months before implementation, it gets challenged, etc. Safer, even if it goes through the House and the Senate, you're going to get injunctions, you're going to get challenging. 12 to 18 months we're probably looking at as well. This lawsuit, same thing. So I mean, it's almost as if stop looking at this stuff because it's not gonna have any effect anytime soon. I mean, I don't want to say I'm frustrated, but it's kind of like,
oh, you're frustrated.
We keep talking about this stuff, and it's like
I can't tell.
Yeah, it's like where's
today.
it? I mean, I'm just being a realist. Like, we're looking at long-term time horizons. Meanwhile, we're talking about these catalysts on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And everybody from a capital markets perspective is hanging on every single word as it relates to all of these that we have no control over. And the time horizon is way out there. So it's like, where do we go from here? And I mean, me personally, I'm looking at adult use conversion, earnings season, and starting to get back focused on the businesses, not things that we can't control. And I mean, I'd love to hear your perspective on that, Anthony, actually looking at the assets and looking at what the space is comprised of, which we can control versus what we can't.
I couldn't have said it better. I mean, you're exactly right. In my opinion, it's not going to change the operations of any of the companies in the sector for at least the next couple of years, even if all this stuff happens. And so, at the margin, where I think this is a positive is it just shows that there's yet another avenue that's being pursued to normalize cannabis. Yeah. And so each one of these is another marker along that path. And I think it works to incrementally get investors that aren't currently interested in the space to continue to stay maybe focused on it, looking at it in the background, getting ready for it, and not necessarily forgetting it. I think that's the biggest upside of it. But yeah, like from a stock perspective and a valuation perspective, it's about what these companies can drive in cash flow over the next 12 months.
Yeah. There's some notable names included in this lawsuit. I will go back to that. Ascend Wellness, Terracin, GTI, Eminence Capital, and Poseidon Investment Management, who are all in support of this lawsuit. What are they ultimately looking to get out of this? Even though it's going to take a while, but ultimately, what are they looking to get out of this lawsuit?
I believe they're looking to do a service to the industry in terms of fighting that legalization fight, but they'll all benefit from the legalization in various forms. And what's interesting, when you read the actual complaint that was filed, many of those names aren't in it. I think it was very thoughtful about the names that were used. There's, one is a farm, right? So they're hitting from a farmer's perspective. One's a slightly larger business. And so they're hitting different businesses in and around the industry in, I think, a smart way to try to appeal to the courts that will hear this, that this has a broad impact, not just on any one particular cannabis company.
Yeah, and I think it's also, go ahead, Ben.
That's a really good point, Anthony, that you bring that up, that it wasn't just MSOs. It looks to me as well that they try to represent with some of the smaller players, private and Pubco. They didn't want the optics to just be purely for, the tier ones in the sector. So that was noted. But I guess I'd like to ask you, do you think, even though this, like a final verdict and appeal potentially to the Supreme Court or whatnot won't happen for a while, is the goal here to, like pile up pressure along with all these other initiatives, like have its own, sort of legal pressure in order to advance the ball forward even before a verdict comes in place? Do you think that moves the needle at all?
I can't speak for their intentions, right? And so you should chat with them for what their intentions are. But I think certainly this will dial up the pressure at the court, because there's other activities going on in the legal sphere related to cannabis. Notably, there's a number of cases that are kicking around circuit courts related to cannabis and guns. And it's interesting, you had, I believe it was the Fifth Circuit, there was a case out of Mississippi where the Fifth Circuit court ruled that it was unconstitutional to ban a gun owner because of cannabis possession in compliance with state law. There's currently a case that was just heard earlier this month out of Florida in, I think it's the 11th Circuit, where they're wrestling with that same issue. If that circuit court rules the other way, you will now have two U.S. circuit courts with conflicting opinions, which kind of forces it up to the U.S. Supreme Court potentially to rectify that. So think about those paths in line with what's the path for this, and will that force them to take this on? Like, I don't think them dropping this lawsuit was coincidental that it was yesterday, nor coincidental that it was shortly on the heels of the rescheduling recommendation. You look at the heart of what they're going after here, they'll be able to use that rescheduling for their benefit in the lawsuit to the extent that it actually comes to fruition. So I think these folks are very well thought out. I think they spent a
that
lot of time, right? This has
makes
been
sense.
talked about. I think Abner Curtin talked about this on an earnings call over a year ago.
Yeah.
And so they've been spending a lot of time strategizing around this. And so I think this will encompass a lot of components that they're thinking maybe in a couple of years all come together to get the Supreme Court to make a ruling around the Controlled Substances Act. But what's interesting is they're not asking for legalization across the land necessarily with interstate commerce. Really, when you read through the text, they're focused on intrastate commerce, saying that the federal government can't intercede, in this case, Massachusetts, where the case came. Again, another smart venue because they're probably looking at the First Circuit and they're probably saying, wow, like those will be friendly judges to this. But they're saying you can't regulate our activities inside the state of Massachusetts. They're not making the argument you should make cannabis legal across the land. And they're saying you should leave this to the states.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.